Do you have fun with your marketing in your private practice right now? Maybe, yes, no. We play a game every single week here at Therapy Flow called Red Light, Green Light. Whether you're watching Squid Games or you've got a 3-year-old at home like me, so we play that on a daily basis outside when we're running on the sidewalk. Stopping and starting as an indication of something that's going on kind of has that been at the bedrock of Therapy Flow and the results that we get for private practices for the last like almost 2 years now. And so, in a pretty quick time frame today, Attilio and I will be going through what we call our red, green, yellow process, essentially, that we go through with our team every single week. And I can confidently say that this is probably in the top 3 activities that we do here at Therapy Flow that drives marketing success, new client acquisition for every single practice that we work with. And so you don't even have to work with us to get value from today's process. We're going to kind of be revealing our internal process on how we drive results week over week for every single one of our practices, especially through Google Ads and other channels like that. And you can take it and you can implement it literally in just a couple minutes by the end of this video. So we're going to walk you through what it looks like. And then we're going to teach you which part of your business to look at first and how to define it and implement this kind of pivotal changing process, this system for your practice. So without further ado, let's dive in today.
Yeah. So I think the best and easiest way to get started with this is if you're spending money on something, you should know how well it's doing. So if you're spending money on your Psych Today profile, you should know if it's doing well or poorly, right?
Yeah.
And so I think setting parameters around is it doing well or is it doing poorly is going to help you understand if you're making progress on that thing or not. And so I think to just get started, if you're spending money, set parameters. Now, everything that you do will have different parameters. Everything that you do will have different parameters, right? If you go to the doctor, your blood pressure has one parameter, and then your blood sugar has another parameter. Or if you go and get some other tests done, they have different parameters, right? They have different normal ranges. And so sometimes you can end up on the higher end of the range, but it's still normal. Sometimes you can end up on the lower end of the range, but it's still normal. And it's not really a problem until it's outside of that range, right? And sometimes
Yeah.
you're just a little outside of the range, and sometimes you're way outside of the range. So just like your body is a complex item, your business is also a really complex item. And so, like, let's just zero in on one thing here. Let's just zero in on Google Ads. A lot of you guys are doing them. A lot of you have tried them. A lot of you do them with us. And so, for Google Ads in this instance, we set a few parameters. It's red, yellow, and green. Our green parameter is anything under about $60 per lead. So we measure everything around the per lead price. Business is a numbers game, marketing is a numbers game, and so we've always found that that's one of the fairest metrics to measure against. Yellow is basically 60 to like $120, where practices can still be pretty successful in this range. It's not the ideal range, and it still requires some work. And then anything above about $120 is considered red. Okay. Do you want to add anything real quick before we continue?
Yeah, and notice that Attilio, when he said green, yellow, red, obviously it's pretty obvious. Green is good, yellow is yeah, okay, red is bad. We've boiled down at least how we want to track Google Ad success to one single KPI, one key performance indicator. But also KPI is a mouthful, right? Green, yellow, red is just easier. It's more palatable. So that's part of this is you have to create measurement systems and language systems around the complex part of your business that's actually approachable and you're actually willing to engage with and do work against or have your team communicate. And I think that's one of the big reasons why therapists and private practice owners, and myself included, I don't do the work to pay attention or track or even hold my actions accountable to some of the work that I'm doing because I just haven't made either the tracking process or the language around what we're describing very palatable. And I think that's a really huge point of all of this is you just have to make your process look good. In this case, presentation does matter. presentation does matter if it's something that you don't or have a hard time engaging with. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that real quick, I'll make an addendum maybe, but because your practice may have one metric that's most important or may have one or two metrics that's most important, I think it's important for you to identify which are those metrics that are most important, right? And if you can focus your ideas around putting in work and energy, and that creates a metric, that's going to get you a lot closer than being like, I want my profit margin to be 15%. Because that doesn't really get you anywhere. That's a goal. That's not a metric that you're
Yeah.
really like tracking. And so keep that in mind as you're kind of going through some of this. Okay. So
Yeah, and we do a lot of consulting with our practices, and there's often a really underlying question, especially I'd say for our larger practices who are doing a lot of things right now. They're already spending across all of their marketing channels, they're doing ads, they're working on a website, right? You've got a lot of momentum going for you, but you still need more. Like, what's next? And looking at this green, yellow, red metric, either inside of a channel as a tracking piece, gives you a barometer of work that you can do. Kind of another way to think through this is green can equal do more of what you're already doing. Just figure out how to do more of that, right? If you're getting a great cost per lead and you're happy with your Google ad results, there's no reason you shouldn't spend more on Google ads in that next week or that next month. Yellow, if you're getting yellow, well, that means some stuff is working, but you probably just make better what is already there. You just need to improve the process a little bit of like, oh, okay, it needs a little more salt this week. It needs a little bit more landing page optimization. It needs a little bit more whatever, right? You dig in and you adjust to move it into green, right? You make it better. Or if it's red, oh man, something probably is broken. You need to do something new. Do something new. You need to rebuild, relaunch, fix, like something's probably fundamentally from first principles. Hey, let's look at this and make some changes. And that's a kind of a good way that we recommend our practices approach marketing success when they're doing this weekly measurement. It gives you a great way to just either lead your team or lead your vendor or lead yourself if you're doing these actions on, hey, if we're in the green, let's invest more. If we're in the yellow, let's just improve and make better. If we're in the red, well, let's build something new and change some of this.
now there's going to be metrics that land in front of or behind other metrics. So like we're talking about
Unpack that.
marketing. When we're talking about marketing here, what happens after you market and get people who are opting in? You have to talk to those people. And so the metrics after someone opts in would be like, what's the rate that you connect with someone on the phone? Or what's the rate that when you have someone on the phone, you turn them into a new client? So there's a lot of metrics that kind of build off of, and it's called throughput in engineering, right? You have this throughput, and there's different percentages of breakdown or a failure on the in-between stages there. And then there's also maybe like more horizontal level items where the success of your organization maybe comes down to 3 or 5 metrics. And so if you're looking at the success of your organization, maybe you're looking at your net promoter scores, which is like how satisfied your clients are of you. So maybe if you do like anonymous surveys, once a month or once a quarter, you're creating net promoter scores. And then you also maybe have metrics around revenue. And then maybe you also have metrics around profits. And then maybe you also have metrics around, whatever else you have metrics around that you want to zero in on that help you understand the pulse of your practice. I think that's going to be, you've got 3 or 5 metrics that really tell you a story, bigger story. So keep that in mind. There's kind of like throughput metrics. So like they're going vertical, and then there's other metrics that are maybe horizontal that tell you a different story. And as you sort of collect some more of this information, and as you start creating a steady flow of information, I think you're going to start realizing that no one metric maybe makes it or breaks it all. Maybe just like your body. If you drink a glass of orange juice, orange juice is really acidic. And so that doesn't just turn your body acidic. Well, why is that? Well, there's buffers inside of your body, and there's other things that are happening that prevent your body from just turning into a puddle of orange juice.
Yep.
So there's not one metric that will probably make and break, but there are metrics that over time will create a decline or a much more difficult situation for your business to recover, your body to recover from. And so,
Yeah.
as you're looking at some of these numbers, as you're measuring some of the angles, as you're looking at some of the throughputs and how one metric up here maybe has like a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6x effect on some of the metrics below it, that's where you can start really focusing your energy. And I've always found that it's usually the simple stuff that is holding you back the most.
Yeah.
Like if people are trying to contact you to reschedule and your administrative team's just not available, and they start having a really poor experience, and then there's like refunds and other stuff that have to go through, or you're having to cause other issues down the pipeline, it's just making it harder for the world to re-interact with you. That's a good way, a slippery slope, we'll call it, way to put yourself into a hot pot.
Certainly. So let's talk about how you implement this into your practice, where you start, what that looks like, and why this is probably going to be the number one thing on at least like a tracking, accountability, communication level, that if you actually take the time to implement today or this next week, is going to just transform your practice this next year. So one, we talked a lot about numbers, like the KPIs with Google Ads or some of those things, but this green, yellow, red doesn't always have to apply to a number that you're tracking. This can also apply to sort of more of a vague situation. I hired an employee last year, was super stoked. She was available to do sort of like sales and some intake calls. And one of her activities that she was supposed to do was man the web chat as well off of the website, just answer questions and help people, provide some customer service. After a couple of weeks of training, she was doing okay. She had some product knowledge. And one day we were reviewing a web chat, and someone messaged in and was like, hey, do you guys provide such and such service? And that was the question. And she replied inside of the web chat, yes, period, all lowercase. And I was like, okay, you answered the question, but something was very wrong here. And that's, oh, I did my job. Well, not quite. What should that job have looked like instead? Well, I would have preferred to be like, oh, hey, Amanda, thanks so much for reaching out to our team. We 100% provide that service, and we would love for you to book a call using this link if you want to explore it further. And that would have been a much warmer, better, positive response and pushed that person to action. It's like, okay, qualitatively two different things there. So suddenly you can use this green, yellow, red to teach your employees sometimes or measure non-numbered responses. So like a customer service rep or a web chat or a sales experience. Hey, this is a green web chat back. Oh, a yellow is you answered the question, but obviously there wasn't any warmth or tone to it. Red, we missed it. We didn't follow up in time, or we gave them wrong information, or some of those things. And you give this person this framework or this, mental model and have that roadmap. So especially when you think through like onboarding or employee issues, this is a really helpful tool, yes, for weekly ongoing tracking. And we'll go back to that in a second. But it can also be a really helpful tool to essentially say, hey, what's good and what's bad in an organization, and quickly train people through the experience. So as we think about implementing this, Attilio, how does a practice owner choose what part of their practice they should apply this to first?
Yeah, I think the first place to apply this on is where you're spending money. So if you're spending money on a thing, you need to be tracking the metrics around it. Meaning, if you're spending money on employees, you need to be tracking the metrics around them. If you're spending money on Psych Today, you need to be tracking money, or you need to be tracking the metrics around them. If you're spending money on fill in the blank. So if you're spending money on it, it needs to be tracked.
Yeah.
Yes, that means even like your simple practice, right? There's probably one or two metrics. You're spending money on your simple practice. There's probably one or two metrics on, is this performing the way that it should be? What's the uptime? And maybe how are employees liking it? Like, is there a score that you can just collect once a quarter just to reassess? And so if you're spending money on it, those are the first things you need to be measuring.
Yep.
Why? Because if you're spending money on it, you
That's
don't
great.
want to let the ball slip there, right? You don't want to let the ball slip.
Yeah. And I say, especially with marketing, especially the larger the practice goes, the more comfortable you are with spending money on marketing, but still probably the less detailed your tracking gets. And I often see that they'll track the downstream effect of their marketing, total number of intakes, probably at this point, their close percentage, maybe a little bit their average cost per lead with Google Ads, but there's a lack of formation around this that leads to action. Let me repeat that. There's a lack of tracking or formation around a set of numbers that leads to action. And that's that second piece. You look at what you're spending money on, especially those big numbers that you're spending money on that are supposed to be producing return on investment inside of your practice, but you don't have weekly actions. It's one of the reasons why our practices have such great Google ad results with our team. We don't have any contracts and with our therapy practices, and more than 95% of our practices stick with us month over month over month doing Google ads with our team. And the biggest thing that we can trace that back to is every week we sit down with our team and we say which accounts are in green, which accounts are in yellow, and which accounts are in red. And then the follow-up to that is not just saying, oh, cool, we know what the information is. We immediately put a plan of action in place that's specific to the situation to move reds to greens and yellows to greens. And often, it's catching those yellow accounts that maybe could have gone red before big things happen and push them back to green. And that's the biggest takeaway. That's the final point, is to capture it and then it lead to action from all of this.
I'll add one extra little point to this. Over time, your metrics may change. So, Josh,
Yeah.
you made your example of the employee that just replied back yes in the chat.
Yeah.
Maybe today that was a green response. Like if
Yeah.
you asked her, if you asked her, how do you think you did? She'd be like, well, I think I did good. I think that was a green response. And you're like, okay, great. You can create new normals. You can create new normals for yourself. You can challenge your previous metrics in a way that allows you to create a new green. So when we first started working with therapists, we didn't know what the green metric was. And so we just set a flag in the ground. We said, when we run ads, we get these kind of results. And then as we started hitting better and better results, we said, you know what? I think a more accurate depiction or description of green might actually need to end up here. And we took a lot of data before making that change. It takes a quarter, 6 months, or even a year to determine if you need to change your metrics depending on outside factors or your performance or your abilities change. And so it's okay to move the metrics around if you have the data to do it. And so as you're going through this process, what your greens are today doesn't mean that they have to be greens forever. And I think as you're looking at setting the metrics, don't be afraid to just set something. Like sometimes if you don't have the data, sometimes if you don't have information, just what you're currently doing is the metric. And so if you're like, great, my employees have a satisfaction course. I think this is a weird example, and so I'm going to give it because I think it's like weird to think about this on the outside case here. So my employees have a satisfaction level of simple practice at 85% or something. And turns out you put training together and you put new onboarding material together, and then all of a sudden the satisfaction score jumps to like 99%. And you're like, great. All I needed to do was teach them how to use the software a little bit better. And all of a sudden they love the tools that they're working with. Perfect. I like that. Let's make sure that we stay on track there. Like that's a weird outside example. No one tracks their clinician love for the tools that they're using, but you could. And it might give you some insight on how to make your organization just that much better.
Definitely. I think as we wrap this all up, as Attilio said, what's a huge area right now that you're spending money on? You probably don't want to go and implement this across every single nook and cranny right this second. Go and target the one or two big areas that there's imprecise or really lack of formative tracking around. Define a green, a yellow, or red. Maybe even just take the numbers you're currently running if you don't know and say, hey, this is the result we're getting right now. Let's make that green. And if it dips below that, it's yellow. And if it's really bad, that's red, right? And then figure out how to improve it from there. And especially, your marketing channels, your employee, anything that has a direct input output that's super clear, easy places to start with. And bottom line, there are a couple pieces that can happen after this. Who owns the tracking process, right? Who's actually marking, or how are we doing the green, yellow, red on a weekly basis? Is this manual? Is this automated? Who's in charge of making improvements or corrections? Who takes ownership of some of those things? Those are more advanced pieces that build on top of this once this starts to get going in your organization, because especially as you grow larger, you can't own the improvement of every single number, right? That's for team members and employees or some of those things. And so if this is the type of stuff, if this is the type of content that you need more of in order to scale your practice, I just encourage you to apply to work with our team, whether it's for Google Ads or whether it's just for critical practice formation principles like this. Wherever you look right now, there's probably going to be a way for you to just quickly apply to work with our team and see if you're a good fit for us to help you implement some of these procedures. Because at the end of the day, having tools like this at your disposal, knowing where to apply them first inside of your practice, and actually getting a clear result, something like Google Ads, where our team does this process totally done for you instead of you having to figure it out on your own. That's what you need if you want specific pieces of marketing or your practice overall to grow. So we invite you to do that process, and we definitely invite you to implement this into your practice today.
Once you get it, once you start it, you won't look back.
100%.
It's the new normal for your practice, and you're gonna love it. We'll see you guys.
See you later.
Oh.
Cheers.